Alright guys, so how much does equipment actually matter? This is a highly debated, highly controversial topic within the table tennis community, and I feel like this needs bringing to light, discussing, because amongst the players that I'm coaching personally, I'm seeing that their perspective on equipment and how that relates to skill isn't really the same as mine. Alright, so we'll let this plane fly by, we'll take a sip of the coffee and we'll get into it. If you don't know who I am quickly, by the way, my name is Kush Baveja. I've been coaching in person for about 3 years after I made the state team in 2023. Now, this is the trap. This is what we're looking at. This is what goes wrong in the moment. So you lose a tight match and you think about, what are the things that actually stop me from winning this match against this opponent? And for way too many people, myself included from a couple years ago, the answer tends to be equipment. And then I'm sorry to say that is just not the answer. If you're thinking right after you lose a game in the 5th set, my rubber is too slow, or if I had his racket, for example, I might win. And from what I've learned, from what I've heard from other players at a high level, that is just not the way that you want to think about these things. And what the big lie actually is it's the trap of believing that the gear can overcome practice. It's simply not a shortcut. And something that we have to admit as table tennis players is that it's way easier to blame our tools than it is to actually confront our techniques and our shortcomings. And when this happens, there's something that I have notoriously been a culprit of in the past, and it's the analysis paralysis. Watching thousands and thousands of hours of equipment reviews, Table Tennis Daily, the lot, going on to Rev Spin, Table Tennis 11, looking at... It's just a waste of time, if I'm honest. What you end up doing when you think that equipment is the problem is more shopping than actual training. And I can't tell you how much slower I improved and progressed purely because I was prioritizing browsing through equipment instead of actually watching people train. And obviously I'm speaking in the sense that this is not at the court. When you're at the court, you should always be training. This is more about the kind of stuff that you watch on social media. This, for example, or watching maybe a professional player train, carefully analyzing their technique, is going to be a lot more effective than browsing through equipment. And something that I like to preach a lot, and something that my coaches and my peers actually had to preach to me a lot, was that 95% of my ability is going to come from my skill, what I do in training. And a quote that I love to fall back on when I'm even in sort of the trap that, if I switch to this rubber, my backhand might get safer without having to do any extra training. And the quote is, rackets are a tool to express your skill, not create it. The saying that 5% of your skill comes from equipment is widely known. I think it originated from some Chinese coaches in the national team, and I always hear everyone talking about it. But what is the rest? What is the other 95% of your skill? Well, it's your technique. It's using your legs correctly. It's always trying to adapt, improve your actual strokes, your serves, your techniques, trying to constantly perfect those nuances. It's also about your footwork in training and in matches. Are you getting into position to play the right shot in your drills? And that actually will ultimately result in, are you getting in position to play the right killers and winners in your matches as well? It's also then about practicing your shot selection. Are you playing the right shots at the right time? Are you practicing that in your training through transition drills and such? And then it's about the mental aspect. Are you staying focused in training? Are you always putting in 100% no matter how long the training session goes, no matter how tired you are? And this applies to competition as well. If you're 3 sets down in a 7-setter game, you still have to believe that you have a chance and you can win. Your ability and skill actually consists of this part of the game, not equipment. And a pitfall that I can invariably guarantee that you will fall into if you're in the first 3 years of your training is having the urge to copy your favorite pro's equipment. I hate to break it to you, but your favorite pro has been training for nearly their entire lifetime. What they need in their game is very different to what you need. And this is something that I had to drill into my head and drill into the heads of the players that I coach. Using a pro player's racket to learn how to drive, to learn how to play, is the same as learning how to drive in an F1 car and going straight into one of the Tour de France races. Is Tour de France cycling?
I may not have a brain, gentlemen, but I have an idea.
The point is that the equipment will likely be too fast, way too spin sensitive, reactive, and it's going to be way too unforgiving for players of most levels. And what's going to be really unfortunate is if you get your hands on one of these types of rackets, if you get a 𝗕𝗏𝗃 on both sides with a 𝗕𝗏𝗿𝗃 ALC a year into your training, you're going to develop very bad habits. It's going to encourage passive blocking and you're going to struggle to play the full strokes. What you have to understand is with these rackets, you have such little margin for error. So if you're using these rackets, your strokes essentially have to be perfect. And that just doesn't make sense. You can't expect a beginner to have perfect strokes. You just don't want to be developing the major technical flaws that can happen when you start off with equipment that is too advanced. The next pitfall is always changing regardless of your level. Your brain and body slowly begin to bond with your equipment, with your racket. A common saying that I've heard comes out of the Chinese national team sort of entourage group, whatever it is that the racket is an extension of your body. And I truly could not have said that better myself. Constantly switching rackets is going to corrupt that connection that you have with your racket. You should know your racket inside out, and it doesn't really make sense. I can't say it should know you, but you want to avoid that adjustment period. If you switch your racket, if you switch your rubber, your blade, for the period that you're adapting to it, you're adjusting to it. You're not going to progress until you fully adapt to it, fully understand it, and there's just going to be no room to improve until you adapt. And that is why it's so important to stick with one controllable, reliable setup. But before that, you should consider joining the Daily Edge. And this is only for players that are serious about their progress. And if you've made it this far in the video, you probably are. All it is I send out one high value, actionable, golden nugget sort of tip every single day for free that you can implement into your training and see immediate improvements. We discuss things like mental frameworks to implement in your matches, your training, little adjustments that you can make, ways you can think about things, common pitfalls, traps to avoid. My dog is barking while I'm recording. Check the link in the description and let's move on. Now, what is the solution? You have to find a reliable and controllable setup that you can commit to for at least 6 months. That's how you build the connection that I was just discussing. You can't consider your racket a fifth limb if you keep chopping it off and changing it, you know? You have to stick for the same racket for a period of time and train consistently with it and grow with it before you switch. But there is signs that you do have to look out for. There is periods of time or moments that you know you need to change. And one of them is when your coach agrees that the racket is a limiting factor. If your coach is coming up to you and telling you that, this racket is dead, or it's not spinny enough for your current level, or it's not fast enough, and it's actually hindering the way you play right now, then I'm going to put my hands up. You got to change your equipment. Another indicator of when it actually might be time is that if you're changing your entire playstyle or philosophy. As long as you don't change your entire playstyle or philosophy to change your equipment, I'm fine. If you're changing to short pips, go for it. And it's also fine to change when you're replacing a dead rubber or a damaged blade. That's completely fine. The idea is that you're not actually changing it. You're just replacing it with a newer, better version. But yeah, that's basically the gist of it. That is my guide to avoiding the equipment junkie trap, other common pitfalls that come with selecting your equipment in table tennis, the overthinking, blah, blah, blah. If you're interested, join the newsletter. If not, I don't have a follow-up. I'll see you in the next video.